Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another special episode of The Review. My name is Marco Torres, and I'll be the host of this episode brought to you by HAPS, the network of now. We wanted to apologize for our previous broadcast just minutes ago. We had some technical issues, but we've gotten those all sorted out. So we're going to do a quick restart and just kind of reintroduce to you guys what today's topic is going to be about. So as the title suggests, we're going to be going over COVID here in California. Over just the last few weeks, the numbers have completely exponentially exploded to the point where we're now at a 0% ICU capacity threshold in Southern California, where Los Angeles and San Diego are located. From there, we're going to be transitioning to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the Electoral College with the Biden campaign officially being selected as the winner of the 2020 election. And lastly, we'll be transitioning to the Biden campaign and the choices that Biden has made to fill his cabinet seats. And thank you again for joining us for the review. So today I'm here today with a really special guest, and his name is Cameron Sadeghi. Cameron is an amazing reporter, along with that's in Southern California. He's in the midst of this entire COVID pandemic, right at ground zero, where the entire world and country is focused on today. Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be at pretty much ground zero, the hub of where COVID is right now, and what the reactions and what your reactions have been over, let's just say, the past week?
Thank you, Marco, so much for having me on the show. It's been pretty rough here as we enter into the holiday season. A lot of COVID-19 cases, as you have mentioned, a lot of anxiousness about the vaccine. When is it going to fully come out for everyone? What place in line are you in? There's a lot of concern there. I just want to read off some more statistics and some news that is pretty interesting. You mentioned at the top of the broadcast that ICU capacity is at 0% across Southern California, specifically in Los Angeles County alone. The ABC7 News reports that about 2 people are dying every hour on average from the coronavirus. So some really dark news and tough numbers here as we enter into the holiday season. We're not at Christmas yet, and we're still seeing an increase and a spike in cases all across the state.
You know, Cameron, those are just some really dark facts from what you just told us. And unfortunately, I think, comparing where we were at 2 weeks ago in the previous broadcast that we did on the review, we also talked about the COVID cases in California. And we talked about pretty much where Governor Gavin Newsom came out and gave a press conference saying that when ICU bed capacity reaches 15% or below, the different sectors of California, there were 5 different sectors, would go into a stay-at-home order lockdown for the next 3 weeks. However, between that time and where we're at now, the average portion of the state is at 11% for that capacity. And this isn't from what health officials say is people just, the county's not or ignoring the rules, but instead it's been this huge explosion of cases that have just rushed people, where it has just immediately decreased from that 16-17% where they used to be at, all the way to where it's at, like, for example, in Southern California being 0%, other places where it's at around 11%. These are just some really big numbers, and especially like looking at a graphic that we have coming up on screen right now for everyone. We have cases, about 150,000 cases over the last 3 days appeared in California. And of those, about 398 people have died to COVID just in the last 24 hours alone. And Cameron, as you just said, that in ABC News reported that 2 people every hour are dying from COVID, and I think even more than that, technically, going from what the death rate is from the graphic right here. I want to thank really quickly before we continue talking a little bit about this, for all the people who are joining us today on HAPS and on our other social media platforms. We want to ask you guys, what do you think about these growing numbers that are happening in California. And with the hope of a vaccination coming right over just in the next coming months, do you think it'll be in time, or do you think the vaccination is safe enough to take to help curb the pandemic? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Please put your comments in the comment bar, especially if you're on another platform. We'll still be able to read them live here today. But going to you, Cameron, what do you think about the vaccination and people's worries about the vaccination going forward in this month and the next months and going into the new year?
Well, I think when you hear a lot of the concerns and fears, it's about the timeline. We know that healthcare workers and hospital workers are receiving vaccinations as of this week. However, what is the future of the Moderna vaccine? We heard from the New York Times reports that the FDA panel endorses the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. It has to be formally approved on Friday. But again, that's good news, and if it is formally approved on Friday, then it would be shipped out to 5.9 million doses would be shipped around the country starting this weekend. It's about the timing and the distribution that is the concern of many people in regards to the vaccination. There has been good news in regards to how good this vaccine is, and also the Moderna one that is coming out soon. So I don't think it's the quality of the vaccine that's the issue as much as time and distribution. We are growing cases across the country, especially in California. Time and distribution are the two biggest key components here with how this COVID-19 pandemic slows down.
Certainly, certainly. And I think just again to reiterate, just 2 weeks ago we were hitting at about 179 people were dying in California per day, and a lot of health officials, including Dr. Fauci, were warning people that this spike, and not just in California but throughout the rest of the country in COVID cases, was just one of the spikes that was going to be coming forward. And this was just shortly after the Thanksgiving holiday. And the second spike that many of the health officials have been preparing for the last couple of weeks has been the Thanksgiving rush. And that was just a lot of people ignoring travel bans and just ignoring to, go see their families, which is an understandable I guess, urge and, want for a lot of people. But unfortunately, people weren't taking the necessary precautions when doing so. And this is the second spike in the explosion in COVID cases that health officials have been fearing and have been trying to watch out for. And as we can see by the numbers, just looking here on the map that we have on the screen, we had our first spike in the summer going from July all the way to August. And then it kind of went down with stay-at-home orders. And this is looking more at California specifically. We had another spike in the middle of August, and then it went really far down. You could see how the virus was getting curbed and how through stay-at-home orders, through using social distance methods and using your masks, it has slowed down exponentially through the months of September, October, and then it started rising again in November. And we can see that was through what a lot of us can tell is the pretty much is just the holiday rush and the holiday get-togethers, and it just exploded from the end of November all the way to where we're at today. And this, unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's peaked yet, and it's continuing to rise and increase. And I think the biggest fear that people have right now is, when will it peak, and will the vaccinations come in on time? And then there have been other fears, and Cameron, I know you mentioned this just briefly a second ago, but it's also the fear that I've already seen on multiple social media websites with some of my friends and my family saying that they will not be taking the vaccination until it's true and tested to see, what are the side effects. So they want to make sure it's actually safe. But I remember going over what Dr. Fauci said is it won't be actually effective unless 75% of the entire nation takes the vaccination. And if even half of the nation will not be nearly as effective, and we will not be able to go back to what we used to be able to be like in person, together, until at least 3/4 of the entire nation has taken a vaccination. I just kind of wanted to ask you, Cameron, what do you think about those numbers? Do you think people might be ready to take that leap of faith when the vaccination becomes available for more people other than just the first wave and the second wave? Do you think the third and fourth wave of vaccinations that come out, do you think people will be willing to take them, or do you think people are going to start turning them down?
There have been several polls, including one poll I saw recently by NPR, where there is optimism about the vaccine, and then that it is from the general public. It is highly effective, according to what we've heard and seen from health experts. However, I think the biggest issue with all of this is if there are going to be major events happening, whether it's sporting events, entertainment events that somehow happen with large crowds, and we're not getting to that 50, 60, 70% number of vaccinations. I'm no doctor, but that seems like it's going to be a major concern, especially if the social distancing measures and the mask wearing measures are not taking place. So yes, we'll see. This is again, as I mentioned earlier, this is about the timeline for vaccine distribution and who gets it first, who gets it last. In many situations, who will get it first. I think a lot of people are wondering that, and there is no definitive answer. We know that healthcare workers and hospital workers are getting it first right now, but what about the general public? What about essential workers? What about non-essential workers? Are they going to be getting it in summer of 2021, or maybe all the way in the winter of 2021? The vaccine distribution process is going to be a huge determining factor in whether or not cases will go down.
Completely. Thank you for that, Cameron. I wanted to turn our attention to one of the comments that we got. Isabel Valdez, thanks for you're right here on HAPS with us, and we wanted to just say thank you for giving us a comment. Reading your comment out loud, it says, yes, meanwhile, the Pfizer says it's millions of doses of vaccines in warehouses with no additional instructions for delivery, and this was just trending on Twitter 4 hours ago. So what's the problem? That's a great question. Unfortunately, I would love to talk about that. I don't have any specific information on that myself, but I know that when we do, we would more than happy be able to talk about that here on the review.
It's such a quick news cycle, Isabel. We're just trying to barely keep up with everything that's going on, and thank you so much from grabbing that from Twitter and putting it on here.
Yeah, and it puts it on our radar and other people's radar as well, so other people can keep track of that. So thanks again for that, Isabel. One thing I think it's really important to look at is just kind of we're seeing this kind of cycle of fear kind of take over. And this happened at the very beginning with COVID. It happened at the beginning of the election. It happened, and it's happening again now with the vaccinations. And I feel like 2020 has just been a reoccurring cycle of fear. I don't even know if I can say cycle again, but it's just been a cycle of a cycle of a cycle. And I think it's just been really interesting to see what's been going on with the country in all of these different macrocosms and the microcosms of these different situations. Unfortunately, we don't really know what can happen next. We have reports from ABC News, CNBC News, that it's going to just continue going higher and higher with the amount of COVID cases, and pretty much on an exponential gain. Again, health officials say to stay indoors, don't go out in areas that are high contact. So Cameron, where you are in Southern California, be really safe, wear a mask, and just be careful. And, remember, this isn't a political statement. This is a survival statement. And I think that's one big thing that this is a great transition moving on to the Biden portion, is that, the Biden campaign has been pushing very hard to unify the country, and that wearing a mask isn't saying, oh, I voted for Biden, or oh, I vote blue. It's saying I want to live and I want my friends and family to live. And it has nothing to deal with politics. And I think where we're at now with about 400 people a day dying in California, that should be exponentially clear that you just want people to live, and you want to live too. And I think that's until we can all get these vaccinations, they're all proven to have minor to no side effects. And I think one of the biggest questions about the vaccinations that I'm actually very interested in is whether or not this is going to be kind of like the new flu vaccination. Is this going to be like a flu shot we're going to have to take every single year to continue to receive immunity? Or is this going to be something that lasts for multiple years or for the rest of our life? As far as we know, it's a two-set vaccination. You get one, and then 3 weeks later, you got to get another. And then it says, I believe, after the following week, after your second dose, you're considered immune. But from that point, when do you need to get another one? And I think that's the next biggest worry is, could this just be, some people have said, is this a money scheme, from, the corporations that have created this, where you have to keep getting it year after year after year, because that actually could be big money. But at the same time, is this once and you're done kind of thing? We don't know, and I think that's even what they've said, that the companies don't even know moving forward. Really quick, going back before we transition, Isabel says the evening news reports also reported that the physicians and nurses are getting COVID-19 and need help. And that's completely true. They're our first line of defense. They're the critical need workers, essential workers who will be getting the vaccine. Technically, they're considered the second group in the line of the 5 groups that will be getting the vaccination. And it's, they do need help. They need support. They're right there with the virus. So I think this has just been a really intense and insane experience for everyone, and traumatizing, to say the least, for families and people going through this. And it's heartbreaking to see the country go through a pandemic like this. But moving off that somber note and going on to, for some, maybe not as somber of a note, and for others still maybe a somber note, is the Biden campaign and the election results officially coming in from the Electoral College, voting just the other day and officially electing the Biden-Harris as the winners of the 2020 election. Cameron, kind of going back to you, what does that mean for the country now that Biden has officially won through legal and through the national perspective?
Now there's less doubt. I think a lot of the doubt was occurring right on election night and a few days after. The networks were deciding whether or not to call it. The Associated Press was deciding between, there was Arizona that was tight, Nevada was tight, Georgia was tight. Now it's confirmed and it's set. So President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be sworn in on January 20th, and we will see what this new transition is like. This election was extremely polarizing, close in many battleground states. It was on a runaway for President-elect Joe Biden. So we'll see how President-elect Joe Biden handles those who did not vote for him. Is he going to appeal to those who voted for Donald Trump, President Trump? So we'll see what happens there, but it is official now. Vice President-elect Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will be sworn in on January 20th.
Thank you for that, Cameron. And, looking at what's been going on with the country, I think Joe Biden, in his speeches multiple times now, from when his campaign announced that he won back just a week after election day, to even just recently in his most recent speech, that this isn't about different political parties. It's about the country as a whole, and that unifying the country is his number one goal. And I think seeing that's the most important thing that needs to happen. Listening to a lot of political analysts talking about Joe Biden's biggest obstacle ahead of him is how to unify the country and how to get rid of COVID-19. The pandemic is the biggest thing that he has to. That the previous, I don't think that it was necessarily the previous administration that left it to him, but there are always something that a previous administration will leave the next one of problems, good things and bad things, right? So going on this, Joe Biden has to pick up a pandemic and has to do his best to clear out an entire pandemic out of the entire country. Whether or not he can do that through executive order, whether or not he can do that through unifying the country and get everyone to come to an understanding. We'll be seeing that in, as the months roll by. But I believe the biggest thing is looking hopeful for everyone is the vaccination coming out and coming soon to many that are in need and that are already in the hospitals. And I think that's the biggest thing looking at this moving forward. So another thing I think, which is also interesting to note, is just Hillary Clinton was saying it was poetic justice when she was one of the electoral candidate people putting in her vote for Joe Biden, saying it was poetic justice to vote out current President Donald Trump, giving him only a single term. And as we all know, she was the national nominee in the 2016 election against a frontrunner against Donald Trump. So for her, this was more than just a win for the country. This was also a redemption or a win for herself. But Cameron, what do you think about things moving forward, I guess, to say with the transition of powers between the Trump administration and the Biden administration in the next coming month or so?
Well, I think you saw Senate Majority Leader Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell officially announce that Joe Biden is president-elect and Kamala Harris is vice president-elect. I think it's going to be time where President Trump will concede and will have a concession speech. I know there are many people out there who do not believe that will happen. I just do not, and this is now personal analysis. I don't think Donald Trump is driven by a specific political wish list, and I don't think he's going to hold on January 20th and have to be removed by the FBI. I don't think we're going to have that kind of situation. So again, I do think we're starting to see, as the new year comes and after the Georgia Senate runoffs, I think you'll see outgoing President Donald Trump give a concession speech and say that now President-elect Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States.
And I think all of our eyes in the country are going to be pretty much turned in this coming month. I think we're just, 3 weeks away until the Georgia runoff election for the two Senate open seats happen. I believe there are going to be two close elections, and that'll pretty much determine whether or not the Republicans will be Senate majority in control, or it'll be a split Senate. The split Senate, again, the importance of this is to determine whether or not Joe Biden will have a lame duck presidency for the first quarter or the first half of his term as the president. If not, it'll be harder for him to work across the aisle due to the Republican-held Senate, but it would still be possible for there to be bills that could be passed, but more would have to be done negotiations. Transitioning a little bit, looking a little bit more at what's going on in Georgia. There were reports just where Stacey Abrams came out and said that there have been huge amounts of voter suppression have been occurring in Georgia, especially leading up to this runoff election. And I was going to ask you, Cameron, I'm not sure if you know a little bit too much about this. I know I'm bringing this up on the fly, but what do you think about voter suppression happening in Georgia? And do you think the Democrats will be able to uproot that and bring out more voters to go to the polls for the upcoming runoff election?
Well, I definitely think, and it's been proven that, you can overcome voter suppression, and if you are able to mobilize a lot of non-voters. There's the early voting component here that's pretty big. I think that's a huge advantage if you're trying to combat voter suppression. I look, voter suppression has been a problem in Georgia beyond this 2021 special election. It's been a problem for many years, not just in Georgia, but in all across the country. Yet I think it's fair to say that Democrats and Republicans, regardless of the result, have to take personal responsibility for what happens. Yes, there are barriers to voting and barriers to winning beyond political ideology and platform, but it is also the responsibility of the candidate to have an inspiring message that resonates with voters. And we'll see what happens in that special election. There is voter suppression all across the country. And yes, in Georgia, it's not exclusive to Georgia, but some may argue that making the saying voter suppression and using it as a reason for a possible loss as an excuse, both Republicans and Democrats should take responsibility for whatever the outcome is. Yet, that is true what Stacey Abrams is saying. There has been evidence of voter suppression, not just in Georgia, but all across the country.
Well, before we go to our last transition of the night, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's been going on with the Joe Biden campaign and his selection for cabinet members. So on your screen now, we'll be seeing a list of different cabinet members who have been selected to be a part of his campaign. So at the very top, we can go through this together. We have the Vice President, Kamala Harris. We have the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain. We then go down to Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. Vilsack, Defense Cabinet member, retired General Lloyd Austin, Energy, former Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm, Health and Human Services, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra, and then Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, excuse me on that pronunciation, and then Housing and Urban Development, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge of Ohio, Interior is Deb Haaland, State is Tony Blinken, Transportation is Pete Buttigieg, and Treasury is Janet Yellen, and Veterans Affairs is Dennis McDonough. So kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this with you, Cameron. Have you heard about some of these names that people should take special note of on their screen? You know, there's some that stand out with, for example, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. We have former Michigan Governor, retired General Lloyd, and California Attorney General Xavier Becerra. But what about the other names? Do any of them reached out to you? I think you were telling me behind the scenes one of them did specifically.
Yes, well, I would say two. I think recently we heard, I believe yesterday, for transportation, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. He was the former 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, the mayor from South Bend, Indiana. Those who support Pete Buttigieg say, you know, he was a great candidate in the Democratic primary. He had success in Iowa. He had success in New Hampshire. There's promise with him. There's a bright future. Those who criticize those who oppose this pick and Pete Buttigieg specifically say that he's not necessarily a transportation expert. Yes, he was a mayor of a city and handling transportation issues, but does he have enough qualifications for that position? Does he have the credentials necessary for that position? And then you look at, in my view, one of the most important cabinet positions is always the Secretary of State. You know, where does the Secretary of State how does the Secretary of State interact with other countries around the world? I know we focus so much on domestic policy, but foreign policy is equally important. Tony Blinken has said that he wants to go back into the JCPOA agreement. Joe Biden saying the same thing, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. We know that President Trump and the Trump administration went away from the Iran nuclear deal. We have in Iran, there's a presidential election coming up in June of 2021. Does the Biden administration, along with with Tony Blinken being included, do they jump into the JCPOA agreement? Do they jump into the Iran nuclear agreement before the 2021 presidential election? It'll be interesting to see the timing there. Do they hold on and wait, or do they go right for it, even though they know that Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani, will no longer be in office? He can't run again for another term. So the timing there will be interesting, and the view that Tony Blinken and President-elect Biden have on the Iran nuclear deal will certainly be of importance in this administration.
You know, Cameron, I think that was really important to point out. There was another person I wanted to point out specifically, and that was Representative Deb Haaland from New Mexico. This is a really important position because Deb Haaland is going to be the very first Indigenous person that's going to be in a cabinet position since the history of the United States. And being in this position specifically is just as important because the cabinet interior position holds a lot of power regarding the public lands lands, specifically the native lands, and so and the relationship between the native people. So with Deb Haaland being an indigenous person herself and being in this position, I think that this is a huge step forward in the country's history and a step forward in bringing in more diversity within powerful positions, as well as having a woman of power in this position as well. And this is just another example of how the Biden administration is coming true to their promise of saying that they would put people in power, of not just people of diversity, but also women of color and women in positions of power. There's actually a really interesting personal note I'd like to say, and that's I was actually there in New Mexico. I come from New Mexico, and when Deb Haaland was first elected as the representative of the first district in New Mexico, I was there reporting, and I was filming everything. I interviewed her, and then I ended up moving to DC, and again, I pretty much in a sense followed her up there. I was doing other work, and I interviewed her again up in DC, and then now I'm here out in California, and she's made it into Joe Biden's cabinet. And I think it's just really interesting how we both have started our almost, you could say, our political careers at the same exact time, but just different fields of expertise. And how we've pretty much have followed each other for a while, and then but we're still talking about her today. So I just thought that was a really interesting note to end off today with. But I want to thank you guys for attending today and for watching the review. And Cameron, I'd like to ask before we close off, is there anything you want to specifically say for our viewers today?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Marco, and everyone. Thank you so much for commenting. Marco, with Deb Haaland, I think it may be time to get an interview with her on HAPS TV. That would be great to hear her perspective and interview her and really ask what her goals are. I think since you have covered her so much, it would be really great if that could happen here on HAPS TV. That's pretty much it for me. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to continue to do interviews and protest coverage and news reports. So thank you so much, Marco, for inviting me.
Yeah, of course, Cameron, and thank you so much for being here. One last thing, I almost forgot to mention this before we close out today. There are still a few different cabinet roles that Joe Biden has left to fill, and these are some big roles, specifically the Commerce, Education, the Justice Department, Labor, CIA, and the Small Business Administration. These are all roles that I think that everyone has their eyes on, just like with Georgia, for the next coming weeks until we see those roles filled out. We also see some other positions with here in California with Governor Gavin Newsom, his position of choosing someone, electing someone to fill the role of to finish the role of that Kamala Harris Senate position until the term is officially over. There have been a few different names that have been pushed forward, but one specifically, Alex Padilla, his name has been thrown up, but there's been some controversy with that. But what we see moving forward, though, is that he's the likely person to be chosen. But that official announcement isn't expected to be made for the next 5 to 7 days from now. But again, I want to thank everyone for attending the review. And again, we'll be here as always to watch you guys and to give you guys the feedback you need on political news information and breaking news. Thank you.